Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another day of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Sarah, and I'm coming to you live from Long Beach, California at the Aquarium of the Pacific. Now, today we're going to be exploring these animals, fish. And I'm so glad we started in here because the first fish we're going to talk about lives in this habitat right here. But before we get started exploring the fantastic world of fish, I want to let you know that we have our live text line, as we do for every online academy program, where we would love to hear from you. If you have any observations you'd like to share, if you have any questions, if there's a fish you'd like to talk about, we would love to hear from you. And I have my friend Stewie who's controlling everything you see behind me, and he's going to take those texts. So you can text us live at 562-286-1838. So that's if you're watching this program live. So it's Wednesday morning, April 6th. I got the right date. It's April 6th. You can text us at that live number. Now, if you're watching this program after the fact, we still would love to hear from you, especially to answer any questions you might have. But we just ask that you email us at this email right below that phone number. It's live@lbaop.org. All right, friend. Ooh, hello. Hello. Oh, we just have to pause and admire our fish friend right here. So we are ready to get started. That fish told us we were ready to get started exploring the wonderful, fantastic world of fish. Now, there are tons and tons and tons of fish species in the ocean, and we have a lot of fish here at the aquarium who live in all different types of habitats or different types of homes. Some of our fish here live right here in our ocean backyard along our coast in California in what we call our temperate water, where it's sort of in the mid-60s, so it's not really hot and not super cold. It's sort of in the middle. And then we have fish that like that really cold water, and then fish like these ones here who like tropical water. So these are some coral reef dwelling fish, and we're going to talk about some of the fish in here, specifically my favorite fish here at the aquarium, and that is the parrotfish. Now, of course, the minute I mention parrotfish, they all disappear from the screen. But we have a couple parrotfish in here, including our large parrotfish called a bicolor parrotfish, this one right here. Now, this is a parrotfish. This is one of my favorite fish in both, or in any type of water, this tropical fish. And I like this fish for a number of different reasons, but let's start by making some observations about this fish. Maybe you know some things about parrotfish. Maybe this is a brand new fish that you've never heard of before, or maybe you've never seen one that looks just like this one. So if you have any observations or questions or facts you'd like to share with us about parrotfish, go ahead and text us in at that text number 562-286-1838. Now, this specific type of parrotfish is called a bicolor parrotfish. And when we put that word bi in front of something, it means two. So it's a two-colored parrotfish. Do you notice two colors on its body? I actually notice maybe a little bit more than two colors, but most of its body are two colors. It's kind of that turquoisey color, and then sort of like a neon orange or like a corally pink color. We call it kind of like a retro color. So this bicolor parrotfish is the largest parrotfish we have at the aquarium. He is maybe about this big. He's pretty big. And then most of the other parrotfish are quite a bit smaller. What else do you notice about this fish? Ooh, look at this one. So bright and so smiley. That's another reason I like these parrotfish, is because they always look like they're smiling. Now, I was going to say, before we talk specifically about the facts of a parrotfish, we can look at this fish and help us understand what makes a fish to begin with, because a lot of the things that make a fish are very easy to spot on these parrotfish. I'm actually going to have us go back to that bicolor parrotfish for a moment, because one of the things I think is really cool, you can see really well, covering this fish's body right here are the scales. So scales are one of the things that make a fish. Their body is not covered in skin like ours. It's covered in scales, and we can see all the scales really clearly here on our bicolor parrotfish. Now, another thing that makes a fish is this thing right here. Oop, too far. Right there. It's kind of like C-shape right here. Does anyone know what that thing is on our fish, or what it helps it do? Everyone take a deep breath. We breathe. Now, we use our nose or our mouth to breathe in to fill our lungs with air. And fish, they need to breathe in order to survive, but they're not using their lungs. Instead, they use their gills. And this thing right here is the covering of the gill for a fish. So if we were to look underneath that covering, we would see something that looks kind of like, almost like a little brush or a broom. And that is what's used to catch all these tiny bubbles of oxygen that are found in the water, allowing this fish to breathe. So fish have scales covering their body. They have gills to breathe. And then there's another thing that makes a fish, and we can see them very clearly here on our bicolor parrotfish. How does a fish move? Do they walk like us? That'd be pretty funny if we saw a fish just walking across the ocean floor. So they don't walk, they don't have limbs like us, but how do you see the fish moving here in this exhibit? What parts of their body are they using? That's right, they use their fins. So fins are another thing that make a fish, and they use their fins to swim. Now fish have lots, oh, there's a parrotfish. There's our bicolor parrotfish, right there. Fish have lots of different fins. They're all used for swimming, but they're all used in a little bit of different ways. So our parrotfish here, you can see them moving those side ones like this to help move them forward. These are their pectoral fins, the ones on the side. You can see them flapping, those pectoral fins. And then their tail or caudal fin, they're moving too fast for me. Their tail fin moves side to side, helps push them forward. And then they'll have a fin on the top called a dorsal fin. And for some fish, they'll swim with their dorsal fin flat, and then they'll stick it up if they need it. It helps them with balance. So if we go back to that bicolor parrotfish, we can see where their dorsal fin is here, their pectoral fins here, and their caudal fin, or their tail fin right there. And they're all used for swimming. So now we know that's what makes a fish, and we used our beautiful parrotfish as a model. But let's talk about some fun things about the parrotfish, starting with why we keep calling it a parrotfish. It's a great question. Does anyone have any idea? We'll go ahead and have that text line back up in case you need that number. We'd love to hear from you. But let's take a closer look at the mouth of a parrotfish, and it might give us a hint as to why we call it a parrotfish. We're going to look at the mouth of a fish, look closer. There we go. What do you see in its mouth right here? What do you notice? Do you see its teeth? Yeah, so parrotfish have specialized teeth. So in this one, they do look kind of like individual teeth, but what they are is they have all these teeth that are fused together. And that kind of just means that they've all kind of blurred together. So instead of like us having individual teeth, they have one big tooth on the top and one big tooth on the bottom. And what that creates is a parrot-like beak, which is why we call it a parrotfish. It's like a bird beak. And they use that to eat. Now, imagine if a fish has a beak for a mouth. What kinds of things do you think it's going to be eating? There we go. That's a great picture. So this is another type of parrotfish. You can see it's different color and it's a bit smaller, but look at its mouth. So you can see these are its teeth. Even though it looks like one big chunk on the top and one big chunk on the bottom, those are a bunch of teeth all squished together. So think about it. If they have hard teeth like this, what do you think they're going to be eating? Soft, squishy things? I mean, they can, but because they have these hard teeth, they have the ability to eat something a lot harder because of that beak-like structure. So parrotfish, they live in a coral reef. And here at the aquarium, the exhibit we have them in is called coral predators. And that word predator kind of gives a hint of what they eat. So predator is an animal who eats another animal. This is our coral predators exhibit. So a lot of the animals in here, they are predators to corals. So the parrotfish, right there, hello. The parrotfish feed on corals. Now you might be wondering, why would they eat coral? Coral is all this stuff we see around here. Coral, coral, this green thing. Hello, not that, that's a fish. This reddish yellow thing, this purple thing down here. These are all corals. Now corals might look like rocks. They are very hard, similar to a rock, but corals are actually a living animal. There's a tiny little thing called a polyp. It looks like a little anemone that lives inside corals, and they create the structure around it. Now when parrotfish, like our bicolor parrotfish, eat, they're looking for that squishy animal on the inside. They're looking for that polyp. But in order to get to that polyp, they have to eat all these crunchy corals. And so having that hard beak allows them to break into the coral. They will digest the squishy animal, and then, some fun thing about parrotfish, is they'll poop out the rest of that coral because they don't really want that hard structure. They can't digest it. There's nothing of nutritional value in it after they've taken out that squishy polyp, and so they will poop out the rest of the coral, and it actually helps us create white sandy beaches. So if you've ever traveled somewhere tropical or you've seen pictures of really beautiful beaches that have bright white sand, a lot of that sand comes from corals that are eaten by our parrotfish and then pooped out. Now, if you live here in Southern California and you go to our beach, you don't have to worry because it's not where we find our parrotfish. But tropical places, they have their sandy beaches are attributed to our parrotfish. All right, I see that we have some questions come in. So before I share another fun fact about our parrotfish, I'm going to take these questions and then I have one more fun fact and then we'll look at a different fish. So let's see our questions. All right, so one of the questions is how many fish are there in this exhibit? So in this exhibit, that's a great question. I would say maybe there's about 10 or 12 different species of fish in here. We have a couple different types of parrotfish, and then there's different types. So the bicolor is one type. That's another type of parrotfish. And then we have some angelfish in here, I believe. And there's even some boxfish, I think, or different types of puffers. So there's maybe about 10 to 12 here in this exhibit. At the aquarium, we had this question earlier today. How many types of fish we have at the aquarium? We have a lot of fish. I don't even have that number. Here at the aquarium, we have 12,000 animals, but not all of those are fish. Now, in the ocean, on Earth, there are 28,000 species of fish. Now, that's a big number. 28,000 is 28,000. And that's in the whole ocean. Clearly not here at the aquarium, but in the ocean, 28,000 different species of fish. Excellent question. And next one we have is how do fish eat food? That is a great question because it really is going to depend on the type of fish. So when we were looking at the parrotfish, like this one right here, it had that beak. And so it's going to eat things like corals to get the animal on the inside of the coral. So it has that really hard beak it can crunch into it. But if we look at some of our other fish swimming around here, like this one, or that one down there, they don't have that same beak. So they're not going to be able to eat the same kinds of foods. So when we look at a fish, we can look at their mouth and we might see a beak. We might see a really skinny mouth that's going to be able to eat little tiny things like little bits of plankton. Fish might have a bigger mouth so they can eat bigger fish or other animals. So it just depends on the type of fish, what they're going to be eating. All right, we've got some more questions. So Isla asks, do fish only live in water? Ooh, great question. And the answer is they do. Now, there are a couple fish who are able to come out of the water. Something called a mud skipper can spend a little bit of time out of the water. But for the most part, fish need to spend most of the time, if not all the time, in the water. And that's because their body is made for that. So think about how they breathe. They're using their gills. So they don't have lungs like us, so they can't come onto land and fill their lungs with air, just like we can't go into the water. If we were to breathe in the water, we would get water up our nose and in our mouth, and it would fill our lungs, and it doesn't feel very good, and it's not very healthy for us. So if a fish comes out of the ocean, it won't be able to take any oxygen out of the air because it needs that water to go over its gills in order to get its oxygen. So they cannot survive out of water. Now, that mud skipper I mentioned is one of the few fish that can spend some time out of the ocean. They have really big gills, and they can fill those gills with water, and then they can breathe out of that water. But eventually, they will need to go back into the ocean in order to get more water to allow them to breathe. And then I think there was another question about the teeth of fish. The question was, how many teeth do fish have? Which is a great question, and again, it's going to depend on the type of fish. So that parrotfish, they have a lot of teeth. It looks like they only have two, the top and the bottom, from their beak. But if we were to zoom in, which we won't see it on this one, but if you were to use a magnifying glass or a microscope, you can kind of see it on here. If you look really closely, you can see there's texture here, right? All these little bumps. And that's because those are all individual teeth, like I said, fused or kind of mushed together to create one beak. So this fish has a lot of teeth. And other fish have a lot of teeth as well, but most fish don't actually use their teeth to eat. They might grab a hold of something, but then they're going to swallow it whole because their teeth are not built like ours, which are built for chewing. Excellent. Now, Kaden wants to know, why are parrotfish my favorite? Oh, thanks for asking, Kaden. So, I like them for a couple reasons. One, like I said before, they always look like they're smiling and they look so happy. I think it's cool how they're all different colors, especially when we got this bicolor parrotfish. We got this bicolor parrotfish at the aquarium maybe about 2 years ago. I think it was right before we shut down for the pandemic. We got this fish, and it's so cool. It's such a bright color. It's also my favorite color. But also I think that all the fun facts about them are really interesting, like the way that they eat corals and then even poop it out. And then the other fact that I was going to share, which I think is really cool, and one of the reasons it makes them my favorite, is they sleep in sleeping bags. You heard that right. Have you ever slept in a sleeping bag? Now at home you might use blankets or a quilt, or maybe a sleeping bag, or if you go on a sleepover at a friend's house or you go camping, you might zip up into a sleeping bag to stay nice and warm. Now, our parrotfish, they don't need to worry about staying warm, but they actually make a sleeping bag for themselves every night. Now that sounds really cool, but it may gross you out a little bit. I'll give a little bit of a warning. How they make that sleeping bag, it's out of mucus or slime. So think about like snot from your nose is like mucus. They make a sleeping bag out of that, not from your nose, but from their body, to cover themselves up every night. And the reason they do this is because there are some other things in the ocean, especially at night, some things like parasites and almost bug-like animals might come out at night looking for a snack, and they might try and bite onto the parrotfish. And so they cover themselves in this mucus, and that protects them so that nothing can get at the body. They can stay nice and safe while they're sleeping. And then in the morning, they wake up and they burst out of that sleeping bag, go about their day, and then every night they make another mucus sleeping bag and they sleep in it each night. And I just think that's kind of fascinating to think about a fish making its own sleeping bag to sleep in each night. So that's all these cool, really interesting facts about our parrotfish, but also the reason that they are my favorite. Excellent. Now I know there's a couple more questions coming in, so before we move on to a new fish, I'll wait for those questions. Ooh, lots of questions. Excellent. Why do fish have to breathe in the water? Great question. So think about, let's take a deep breath again. What are we breathing in? Oxygen, right? Oxygen is what we breathe. That allows us to stay alive. And any live animal needs to be breathing oxygen. But the way that they take in oxygen might be a little bit different depending on the type of animal. So any animal on land with lungs is going to be breathing the oxygen in the air. But a fish, they need to breathe a different type of oxygen. It's something called dissolved oxygen. And what it is are these teeny tiny oxygen bubbles. We can't really see them but without looking under a microscope, but teeny tiny oxygen bubbles in the water. And that's how they're going to breathe. They're going to get the same kind of oxygen we're breathing. It's just in a different form. Ooh, take a look. This is our shark lagoon. So it's another coral reef habitat with some different types of fish, maybe even some larger fish, or even animals you didn't realize are fish. But these animals in here, they need to be in the water because that's where their source of oxygen is. So they are able to take out those tiny bubbles of oxygen using their gills. And so if they aren't in the water, they aren't able to find the type of oxygen they need in order to breathe. All right, Miss Forsey's class has a pet betta fish. Is it Chongo? Excellent. How cool. So you can make observations of Chongo in your classroom and see if it's similar or different to the fish we're looking at. I bet there's going to be some differences, maybe the color and the size and even what you feed Chongo, but I bet you'll find some similarities like the fins and the scales and maybe even the way that Chongo moves might be similar to some of the fish we have in here. Thank you, Miss Forsey's class, for sharing your pet with us. All right, we've got Lake Matthews' 5th grade class asks, what do fish do while they sleep? Ooh, interesting question. So, the parrotfish, they basically don't move much when they sleep, right? They're in their sleeping bag. But that's different from how most fish sleep. So most fish, they actually keep moving when they sleep. So think about it. When we go to sleep, we close our eyes, we lie down. We might move in our sleep, but we're not moving our body too much. But for animals like our fish, who have to keep moving because they need to get that water going over so they can be breathing, because if they stop moving, there won't be water moving over their gills to breathe. They actually shut down half of their body at a time to sleep. So think about that. Imagine if you closed one eye, and then that side of your body, like your left side, your left arm, your left leg, everything went to sleep, but your right side was still awake and doing things. That's kind of how these animals sleep, because they'll shut down one side so it can rest, but the other side is awake so that they can see. They can make sure there's no predators around. They can move and keep breathing. And so they have to stay active part of their body while the other part of their body rests, and then they'll switch. So both parts of their body will get some rest, but one will always be awake. So they sleep in a very different way than we do. Excellent. Thank you for all those questions. Keep them coming. We're going to look at some different fish in here. Now, this is our shark lagoon, but I mentioned there are lots of different fish in here, including some of those animals you may not have realized are fish. So we see our fish, tropical fish right here. We know that one's a fish, but did you know this is a fish? Right there. That shark is a fish. And we've got our stingray's tail right here moving. Oh, it just moved off camera right there. That's the tail of our stingray. And we've got another stingray over here. That is also a fish. So the word fish is a really general term. It covers a lot of animals. It covers 28,000 different types of bony fish, so fish whose skeletons are bones, like that parrotfish, like some of these other tropical fish, this one here called a unicorn fish. But sharks and rays are also a type of fish, but they're a little bit different in what their skeleton is made of. Oop, that's a zebra shark, also a type of fish. So the bony fish, the other fish we're looking at, like the parrotfish or those unicorn fish, their skeleton is made of bone, which is why we call them bony fish. But sharks are what we call cartilaginous fish. They have cartilage for their skeleton. Have you heard that term cartilage before? Do we have it in our body? Because we definitely have bones, right? Our whole skeleton is made of bone. That's what allows us to stand up straight or sit down or run or move and dance is our skeleton. But do we have any cartilage in our body? Go ahead and point to where you think we might have cartilage in our body. You can point to your nose. You can point to your ears. Or even when you move your arms, we have cartilage between our joints. So that way when we move our arms like this, our bones don't grind together. So we do have some cartilage in our body. Now, if you're touching your nose, wiggle the end of your nose. It wiggles, right? It's kind of flexible. Or you can wiggle your ear. You can fold it over without breaking it. So cartilage is a very bendy, very flexible material. And if we watch how our sharks and rays move, their body is very fluid. It moves in a very different way than our bony fish do. However, if we look at a shark's body, we will find scales, gills, and fins. So they are a fish just like that parrotfish was. They're just a different type of fish. All right, Lake Matthews wants a shout out. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And we have a question of how do fish reproduce? Excellent. So for most of our bony fish, not all of them, but most of them, they are going to be egg-laying animals. They will lay eggs, and a lot of fish will lay a lot of eggs. So most fish will lay thousands and thousands and thousands of eggs at one time. But there are a couple of types of fish, including some sharks, that do give live birth. So instead of laying eggs, they give live birth just like humans do. So for the most part, they are an egg-laying species, but there are always some exceptions. All right, let's take a look at another type of tropical fish. This one might be easily recognizable for all of you watching. Ta-da! Do you recognize this fish? I bet a lot of you might find this fish familiar. This is our clownfish. Now, clownfish are another type of bony fish, and they live in a similar habitat to that parrotfish. Now, we do call these anemone fish sometimes. That's more of a general term because, again, there are lots of different types of clownfish. They come in different colors, too. So on this one, we see, or these are called Clark's clownfish. We see the orange and the white stripes with the black lining. But clownfish can be pink, they can be black, they can have more orange and less white stripes. We see lots of different variations on the clown or anemone fish. Now, we call them anemone fish for a very specific reason, which you can actually see here. Where do you see these fish living? We see some rocks, but do you know what this thing is that they are living in right here? Have you seen that animal before? It is an animal. It kind of looks like a flower or a plant, but that's an anemone. So we call them anemone fish because they live in anemones. Makes sense. But anemones are really special animals. They have these tentacles, and these tentacles can be used to do something really specific. Anyone have any ideas what those tentacles are used for or what they have the ability to do? Now, this is a tropical anemone, but we do find anemones all over in basically all waters, including here along our coast. So anemones, they have the ability to sting. So they have stinging cells in these tentacles. So most animals who move in and out of anemone might get stung. It could hurt their body. And that's how the anemones can catch their food to eat or how they can protect themselves. But these clownfish, they are very special. They have a special layer of mucus that covers their body. Now, it seems like we have been talking about mucus a lot today, right? We talked about the parrotfish makes this slime or mucus sleeping bag that covers their body for protection. And these clownfish, they have a different type but similar type of mucus that covers their body. Now, most fish in the ocean actually have a layer of slime covering their body, and that acts as protection. But the slime that covers the body of the anemone fish is a little bit thicker, and it's specialized. So when they swim through these anemones, they can't feel the stings from the tentacles. Now, this way, they're able to stay safe in an anemone, and it makes it harder for predators to get the clownfish. And in return, so sort of as a thank you to the anemone for protecting the clownfish or the anemone fish, the anemone fish will eat any scraps of food that are left behind, help keep the anemone clean, and they also chase away any predators who might try and harm the anemone. So they work together. We call it a symbiotic relationship, which is just a big word for saying they work together. They both benefit from this relationship. Oh, look at this one. So this is a different type of anemone fish. You can see its body looks pretty different. This one is pink. It's only got one white stripe, and the rest of the body is pink. But it's another type of fish similar to those clownfish we were looking at. All right, so we have another question. Janelle wants to know, why do fish die so easily? Now, this is an interesting question, and it really kind of depends on the animal. It depends on, they can be really sensitive animals. So just like any animal you think of, whether it's in the ocean or on land, there are certain things that animals need to survive, right? We need food, we need shelter, we need protection. And some animals, it's a little harder for them to find those things, or they need very specific things. So some animals, some fish might be very sensitive. And if the water temperatures change too much, if there are more things in the water, not enough food, it can make them sick, and it can make it really hard for their survival. So some fish just tend to be more sensitive to changes in their environment. And sometimes their environment might be perfect for what they need, but sometimes there are outside factors that maybe we can't control or they can't control that changes their environment, and it makes it harder for their survival. Excellent. We've got some more questions coming while we're looking at another tropical coral reef habitat and some other tropical fish. I do love this next question. What is my favorite shark? Now, I do love this question because sharks are my favorites, and my favorite animal in the whole entire world is a shark, and it is a whale shark. Look at this amazing video footage of a whale shark. Now, this whale shark, I believe, is actually pregnant, which makes it even larger than they normally are, but they are pretty large animals. They are large fish. So just as I mentioned sharks before, they are a type of fish. This whale shark is the largest fish species in the ocean. In general, whale sharks get about 30 to 40 feet long, which if you think of a yellow school bus is about the size of a school bus, a little bit longer. But the largest on record is 60 feet, so that's double that. They are another tropical dwelling fish, and I just think they are beautiful and amazing, and that is why they are my favorite shark, favorite animal in the whole world. All right, we have another really cool question. This one's a fun one to answer. How do fish clean themselves? It's a good question. So we actually will see some fish helping each other out, and cleaning each other is one way. Sometimes we'll see fish, they will be swimming and then they'll kind of turn to the side and they'll rub their body against the bottom of their exhibit or against some rocks or coral. And we think they're trying to get some stuff off of their body. Maybe some dirt got on them, some pieces of food, or even a little parasite or bug. And so they rub against something to clean it off. But we also know that in one of our big exhibits here, there's actually a cleaning station. So think about when your mom or dad is driving and their car gets really dirty, where do you take it? To the car wash. You might wash it at home in your driveway, or you might go to the car wash and get your car washed. And you drive through this machine and they spray water, and then they spray soap, and then they scrub, and then they rinse it off, and then they clean and dry everything. So it's kind of like a wash station. But here at the aquarium or in the ocean, we actually find fish wash stations, kind of like a fish car wash, where there's some large fish who will come to an area, and then there are tiny fish called wrasses. Now, some wrasses are big, but the cleaner wrasses are only about this big. They're really long and skinny. They're only about this big, and they help clean fish because they're so small. They can get into the mouth of the fish and clean their teeth. They can get into the gills of the fish and clean off the gills to make sure that they can breathe well. They can clean off the whole body of the fish. And it's another one of those symbiotic relationships, those relationships where they both benefit, because the big fish is going to come over to the little fish, and it's going to allow the little fish to clean its whole body. It gives the little fish food, because they actually eat that stuff, and in return, the big fish doesn't eat the smaller fish. So sometimes fish will clean themselves by rubbing up against places, and sometimes we see them helping each other out, where one fish will help clean another fish. So it's kind of a fun thing to watch. You can see it here every so often at the aquarium. We'll see those little wrasses swimming in and out of the mouth, and you might think, oh my gosh, that fish is going to get eaten. But it's not getting eaten. It's getting its own meal by cleaning off the mouth and the gills and the body of the fish. All right, friends, we are about out of time. I'm so glad you sent in so many questions. That was so great to be able to answer what you wanted to know about our fish today. Now, before we go, I do want to ask teachers, if you are watching, if you can text us in the number of students you have watching. We're trying to collect this data, and it helps us better target our programs and better suit the needs of our community who are viewing. And we're so thankful that you tuned in today, that you sent in questions, that you're watching along with us whenever we have our online academy. And if you're looking for more programming, we have another program coming up in 30 minutes at 10 o'clock. Cynthia will be doing her her Spanish program, and it's Asking a Scientist. So if you have any burning questions, maybe about what we talked about today, or any other questions that you're just dying to know the answer to about our ocean life, go ahead and tune in with us at 10 o'clock, and Cynthia will be able to answer your questions then. Thanks, everyone.